before the video starts. Like nobody is subscribed, so please subscribe. Thank you. Welcome everyone to the top 10 problem cards of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. It's one of the most controversial cards the community hates or has a problem with are on this list, and we need to discuss why these are problems and should we ban them. Well, firstly, at our number 10 spot, we have Kaiser Colosseum. This is a continuous spell card that reads: if there are one or more monsters on the field of the controller of this card, his/her opponent cannot place a monster on the field if his/her monsters would exceed the number of monsters that are on the field of this card's controller. Cards already on the field before this card's activation are unaffected by this effect. What does this mean? Well, if I control more than one monster and then activate Kaiser Colosseum, you cannot have more monsters than I do. You can only hit the same number. Why is that a problem? Well, for preface, this is already banned in the TCG, and it can be used to let your opponent only control one monster. Now, if I think of a deck like True Draco, which just synergizes perfectly with being a continuous spell, I summon one monster and I activate Kaiser Colosseum. You could only have one monster, so any of your extra deck cards, pretty unusable. And there's also no cost for this card. It's ridiculous. But, okay. Why might it not be so bad? Well, there's no natural protection for the card. In itself, it doesn't protect itself. Any spell trap removal, which there is an abundance of in the game, it's a matter of whether you're willing to run it or not, it just evaporates it. You need external cards to protect it. And when you get later in the game, where let's say True Draco have put multiple monsters on the board, if they see Kaiser Colosseum, they're going to think, oh well, it's not actually that good anymore. However, I still don't think that justifies the card being in the game. I think this card should be banned. I think forcing your opponent to only control one monster for no cost is not fair. At number 9, we have Supreme King Dragon Starving Venom. What is this card? Well, I'm not going to read its full effect because it's long, but to summarize, put it in footnotes. You can target a monster in the field or graveyard, and then it copies its effect and name. Why is this a problem? Well, Lyrilisk Nightingale has an effect to inflict 500 damage to your opponent for its level. Now, I don't know if you've noticed, but Supreme King Dragon Starving Venom is a level 8. 2 of these things, which by the way, its effect to copy an effect is not once per turn, it's a level 8, which means it does 4,000 damage. If I summon 2 of these things and copy that one Nightingale, that's game. And this thing is really easy to summon as well. 2 Dark Pendulum monsters basically got no cost because it's a contact fusion. You don't need poly, you don't need any fusion spell. On top of that, you can copy Electromite to make even more ridiculous boards. This card is ridiculous. But why is it not that bad? Okay, well, first of all, let's look at the materials. 2 Dark Pendulum monsters. It's not all Pendulum, and even then, it's only Pendulum. It can't be that broken, because it can't be used in every deck. And even then, its FTK it puts out isn't actually that consistent. There was definitely a point in time where the FTK was considered one of the biggest problems of Yu-Gi-Oh! And it was one of the hardest things to deal with. But even nowadays, it's very hand trappable. There are things like Nibiru, Dimension Shift. Actually, Dimension Shift is a bad example. Nibiru, Ash Blossom, Droll. If you want to play the myriad of FTK hand traps, you could stop the FTK version. I wouldn't advise that, but that's an available option. But because of that, I still think this card needs to be banned. I don't think there's any fair situation to use it. Copying effects in Yu-Gi-Oh!, as has been extensively talked about, is never fair. Hard ones per turns are there for a reason. And even with Nightingale, that card wasn't intended to be that easy to use. Simply put, copying effects should not be legal in Yu-Gi-Oh! That's how it is. This card should be banned, especially with how easy it is to make. Now, number 8 spot, we have Ash Blossom and Joy Spring. Now, this is one the community has a lot of problem with. It's one of the key figureheads you see in the old head versus new school debate, right? Pretty much, when a card effect is activated, includes any of these effects, you can quick effect, so on your opponent's turn, discard this and negate that effect. But it's any of these 3 being add a card from deck to hand, special summon from the deck, send a card from deck to graveyard. 3 of the most important things for any deck. The last of those 3 probably less so. Not every deck wants to use the graveyard, but a lot of them do. And it's a hard one per turn. So why is it a problem? Well, it's a negate for really no cost apart from itself. That is what a hand trap is called. Hand trap, it's a monster that just activates in a hand, discard itself, and let's stop your opponent doing something. It's usable in actually pretty much every deck. There's only a couple examples I wouldn't play this in. You know, any deck that plays dangers, I wouldn't play hand traps in, because you can't necessarily hold them for your turn 3, or turn 2 rather. You can't, you know, reliably use them in that way. So, you know, there are decks you can't use them in, but you should use them in every deck generally. Rogue decks get massive hurt from this card, you know. If I'm playing a deck that, let's say Flower Guardians, right? And I need to summon my Pine. Pine's effect allows me to draw 1 card, reveal it, special my Flower Guardian, and that's what gets all the combos going. If they Ash Blossom that, what do? Because most of the Flower Guardian cards might be dead at that point. And at this point in the game, it's almost required in every deck. Not always. There are formats where Ash Blossom isn't good. However, generally speaking, it's always worth having an Ash spare. But why is this not that bad? Honestly, combo decks have gotten so powerful nowadays that if you don't have a way to stop them on their turn, you know, you just might as well surrender then. So having Ash Blossom is essential for times like that. This card genuinely is required. It actually helps weaker decks too. Sometimes there are duels where, you know, I could be playing zombies. Not a fantastic deck, but not a bad deck. I'm playing zombies and, you know, my opponent's playing Drytron or something, and I Ash them at the right time. That's their turn shut down. I can set up my zombie board, and then they're going to have to fight me. There's not much they can do about that. It actually helps the lower decks as well. And it's hard once per turn doesn't mean that, you know, oh, you just play 3 and you had more negates than some decks could put out. No, it's a hard once per turn. It's 1 card on its own. And even then, it doesn't negate everything. That has to be remembered. It doesn't negate every card in the game. This card is very fair. And I think that actually people who want to ban it probably aren't thinking about the level of play that really matters for Yu-Gi-Oh! Nowadays. Ash Blossom is essential to the game's survival. However, it is sad to see what hand traps have become in the modern era. And at our number 7 spot, we have Block Dragon. Now this one hurts me personally. I am one of the biggest Adamantipator players. It's my favorite deck. If you go to my channel, you'll be able to see I've made multiple videos about this deck. I'm going to spare you the effect, but Block Dragon pretty much, it's a +3 for any rock deck. You can add 3 rock monsters from your deck to your hand when it gets sent from field to graveyard, so long as their levels equal 8. Now in Adamantipator, you add Gigantes, Adamantipator Researcher, and Seeker. Yeah. And that's ridiculous on its own. That lets you unbrick a lot of hands. Its summoning isn't once per turn. You only have to banish 3 Earths, which isn't that bad, really. And in Adamantipator, you can now make Bar on the floor. You can make Bar on the floor. So, it's kind of ridiculous for its deck. The only reasons I could say it's not that bad is if you want to kill Adamantipator, there are better cards to hit. Really, like there's a lot of better things you could do instead. And it only searches rock monsters, right? It's not searching everything in the game. And apart from Adamantipator, rock kind of sucks, honestly. If you really want to keep Block Dragon in the game, I would say you should be banning Raptite, the Synchro monster. Because as soon as Raptite's gone, Adamantipator sucks. Genuinely. If you want to keep Block Dragon, just get rid of Raptite, and that deck really struggles. It's nowhere near as good as it used to be. So, I would say ban Block Dragon because I don't think it's fair to ban Raptite. I think Block Dragon, historically, it's seen play in other decks as well. If you've played a lot of TCG, you might remember Block BA, or Block Burning Abyss, for those of you who aren't aware. It was a weird deck list. It's not one I know very well, but I can say that it's also some success. So, Block Dragon, it's had its run. It probably should be banned for as much as it pains me as an Adamantipator player to say. Now, number 6 spot, we have DD Dynamite. This is one of the most toxic cards in the game at the moment. It's a 3-card FTK. You've probably seen tons and tons of bots playing it on ladder. There is no fair and reasonable way to use this card. Inflict 300 points of damage to your opponent's life points for each of their removed from play cards. What this card was probably intended to do was be a counteract to banish decks, right? Back in the day when you had Dimension Fusion, banishing cards was good. However, with the introduction of a card like Banquet of Millions, where you could make your opponent banish 15 cards from their extra deck, 2 of this is game. Which is not fair in the slightest. 1 DD Dynamite after activating Banquet of Millions is 4,500 damage. You activate 2 of these, that's game. Why is it not up? It requires your opponent's banished cards. It's not your own. However, there is no fair situation to activate this card. Ban it now. The ladder has become unplayable because of this card needs to go. The only reason it isn't at number 1 is because it's only been good with all the extra consistency cards we have in Master Duel. You know, if we didn't have a card that comes up later on this list, which I won't spoil, we wouldn't be seeing this being so consistent. It wouldn't even be considered. So, get rid of this thing. It's only made good because of all the things supporting it, but there's no fair reason for this card to be used. Now, number 5 spot, we have True King of all Calamities. I'm sure you all saw this coming. If not here, probably further up the list. It is a rank 9 that has the effect of quick effect, detach 1 material from this card, declare 1 attribute. So in this case, you can see on the card that says dark in the top right as the attribute for those of you who aren't aware. All face-up monsters on the field become that attribute. Also, all monsters in your opponent's possession with that attribute cannot activate their effects or attack monsters. Also, just can't attack. So, why is this a problem? Well, making rank 9s isn't that bad anymore. I remember back in the day, you know, you had to pull some pretty convoluted combos. Blue Eyes had an interesting combo where you could use, I think all you needed was it would have been like Blue Eyes and Global, and you had a full True King of all Calamities, pretty much for free. However, that's not the case anymore. Making rank 9s has become increasingly easier. Eyesight, Virtual World is part of the problem for that. It negates all monster effects. People complain about cards like Skill Drain, which isn't on this list. For the reason of, I think there are better problem cards. If I was doing top 15, it would have been in there. But that negates all monster effects, including in the hand. You possess the monsters in the hand, and if they get the right attribute, well, that sucks, doesn't it? To negate this card, it's kind of unreasonable. Because if your opponent activates this in the draw phase or standby phase, what? You're going to have to impermanence or droplet it. That's it. You have no other options. It becomes so difficult to deal with. And even then, the effect stays after you get rid of it. So let's say they use the effect and then I summon the Kaiser over it. I still don't get any monster effects my turn. So now my opponent has an opportunity to kill me, and I've given them a 2-2 beat stick. That's kind of a problem. But why is it not that bad? Well, again, it's rank 9, which I did say that's not that difficult anymore. But it's not like every deck makes rank 9s. I mean, you know, how's Adamantipator making True King of all Calamities? How's Drytron making this? Sure, technically those decks could if they really tried, but not reasonably. You know, they're not gonna be making True King of all Calamities like it's nothing. And it can be negated. You can draw the impermanence, you can draw the droplets, you can draw the effect veilers, but that's it. It's not fair. It pretty much wins the game on its own. I think the card should be banned. There's nothing fair or fun about this card. Number 4 spot, we have Chicken Game. This is the card I was talking about earlier. Chicken Game, I know the resolution on that image isn't fantastic, so I will read it for you. The player with the lowest life points takes no damage. That's a problem in and of itself. That's a very strong effect. Once per turn, during the main phase, the turn player can pay 1,000 life points to activate one of these effects. Draw 1 card, destroy this card, your opponent gains 1,000, and neither player can respond. Why is this a problem? Well, it's a better Upstart Goblin. Upstart Goblin gives your opponent 1,000 life points and draws your card. This one, you pay 1,000 to draw a card. But why is that necessarily better? Well, you also have to bear in mind it's a field spell. So you have Terraforming to search it, so immediately you have 4 copies of Chicken Game. Then you have Pseudo Space. What Pseudo Space does is it will target a field spell in your graveyard, banish it, and copy its effect. So now you have 7 copies of Chicken Game, which is, when put together with your 3 copies of Upstart Goblin, that's 10 copies of Upstart Goblin. You now have a 30 card deck for 0 requirement. It's ridiculous. Your opponent has to destroy this thing as well, by the way. They have the option to, you know, keep it and then see what they can do to try and kill you. But if you've activated 3 of these things and 3 Upstart Goblins, you're going to be down 3,000 life points. They're going to be up 3,000 life points. They can't do damage to you. So they have to destroy it. Because they can't do damage to the player with the lowest life points. And you've spent all your life points already. So this thing being on the field is already a problem. And bear in mind, your opponent can't respond to this. They can't, like, you know, activate Ash Blossom on it, which they shouldn't, but they can't. Or they can't, like, you know, activate something to negate and destroy it, because then it's not in the field. So you don't get to draw, and they don't have to deal with the effective chicken game. Hopefully, assuming that you don't have another one. Well, why is it not that bad? Your opponent gets the effect to draw, but as I've already stated, they kind of have to destroy it. They don't really have a choice in that matter. And it's a +0. It doesn't actually net you advantage, it just gets you through your deck. That's still a problem though. As I've said, 3 chicken game, 3 soda space, 1 terraforming, 3 upstart goblin is a 30 card deck. That's a problem. This is what he's enabling DD Dynamite. This card should be banned, it shouldn't be legal, and there are cards I was shocked that I didn't notice they were unbanned. This is one of them, along with Kaiser Colosseum that we talked about earlier in the list. So, ban this card immediately. It's not fair, it shouldn't be legal. And at our number 3 spot, we have that Grassless Screener, my favorite card in the game. What does it do? If you have more cards in your deck than your opponent does, send cards from the top of your deck to the graveyard so that you have the same number of cards as your opponent. Why is it a problem? Well, let's play the hypothetical. My opponent's playing Drytron, I'm playing a deck based around that Grassless Screener. I have that Grassless Screener in my hand, and I'm going first. He will have a 40 card deck, I will have a 60 card deck. Obviously we draw our hands, so it's 35 to 55. I activate that Grassless Screener. Let's say hypothetically he can't negate that. I'm now going to mill the top 20 cards in my deck for free, no real requirement other than I had to find grass in my deck. That's a lot of effects nowadays. There are so many effects that trigger in the graveyard. If you want to play Skull Servants, Zombies, Shaddoll, Lightsworn, there's so many decks that I can't even list them all. That Grassless Screener becomes infinitely more powerful as the game expands. I think of Fairy Tale Snow being a big problem with this card. It's ridiculous sometimes. It can be described as an insta-win button. I remember back in the TCG, this would have been around Zodiac format. We're coming just at the tail end of Metalfoes format as well, just before Master of 4 comes around. I remember a friend of mine playing that Grassless Screener in a Lightsworn deck, and it was so satisfying to resolve. That Grassless Screener, Skull Servants and Shadolls was the first deck I ever learned. It's super satisfying, but it's, you know, when your opponent drops it on you, it can feel quite bad sometimes. But why is the card not that bad? Okay, well, let's talk about this. Why is the card not that bad? Well, the mirror matches make this card dead, right? If we both got 60 card decks, well, okay. Maybe if you've done a few combos, I might mill 3. Oh no. Like, it's not that good in the mirror match. And even then, like, the deck becomes super inconsistent, right? You have to see that Grassless Screener for your deck to become, like, full steam. And you can only have 3 copies of that Grassless Screener, and then 3 copies of Left Arm Offering, which banishes all cards in your hand to search 1 spell, which would be that Grasp. So you play 6 copies in a 60 card deck. It's only 1 in 10 cards in your deck lets you, like, activate your win condition. That's really low in a lot of decks nowadays. But, you know, to say it's fun is a bit of an understatement to me. It adds so much variance into what decks are viable, to what are playable. You know, Skull Servants. Skull Servants without that grass, pretty bad, I'll say that. The only other playable version is with Dangers. And, you know, if I want to use Dangers, I'd just go play Grand Magi. So, that Grassless Screener is, I think it's actually good for the game. I don't want this thing banned. However, the reasons that our number 3 spot right here is because I know that this is a bit of a problem amongst some players. Some players really hate that this card is illegal because it's an insta-win button. Other players absolutely love it, and I know there's a lot of, you know, a lot of debate around that. I have my deck list of my personal that Grassless Screener list, which you'll be able to find on my channel. It is a Skull Servant Shaddoll list. Obviously, that's one of my favorite decks of all time. So, I don't think this should be banned. Not because I have personal stake in it, but because I genuinely don't think it's that bad. And at our number 2 spot, getting into the big guns here, Herald of Ultimateness. I'm sure if you play Master Duel, you're aware what this thing is at this point. It's a ritual monster. It has to be ritual summon with a certain ritual spell. No, it doesn't. You can use a Drytron ritual spell, which we'll get into why that's a problem. When your opponent would special summon a monster, or activate a spell trap card, Or monster effect, quick effect, send a fairy from your hand to graveyard, negate, and destroy. Not once per turn. What's the problem here? Well, that negates everything. There's nothing that you can do that this will not negate besides, like, kaiju it. Other issue is this is very easy to abuse. So Drytron have a whole ritual mechanic about monsters with 2000 attack. Every interval 2000 attack requires you to tribute another monster with 2000 attack. This only has 2000 attack. This is a tribute of one Drytron monster, or one material from their Xyz monster. So, okay, well, it's easy to summon, but you have to get rid of a fairy. Drytrons aren't fairies, they're machines. Searching fairies is really easy, especially in Drytron. You tribute Ben 10, search a fairy. Activate Eva in the graveyard, search 2 fairies. There's so many ways to search fairies that you can stack your hand with 5 fairies for ultimateness, and there's not much your opponent can do. You just negate everything they try and do, and wow, would you look at that, I'm going to game you next time. And even then, the outsourcing, as I said, are limited. You can Gamma Steal it, but that's it. That's really your only option if you want to get rid of this thing, or you have to you have to get a spell that can't be responded to. So let's say Dark Ruler no more, stuff like that. It's really difficult to deal with. But okay, why is it not that bad? Well, like I said before, you have to get the fairies in hand, and if I ban cards such as Cyberage or Ben 10 or Eva, then this card's not that great. It gives, Drytron the option to play it, but it's not strong. My counterpoint to that, I would say, is really the searches themselves aren't a problem. And ultimateness, the thing is, once you deal with it, once you get rid of the searches, the card's unplayable. No one's going to play this. They're only going to play the other versions. They're going to play Little Herald. And the searches themselves, there's no real fair reason to be searching a bunch of fairies as well. I argue this should be banned because searching the fairies isn't broken in itself. Negating everything is broken in itself. I don't think there is a fair reason to have ultimateness in the game. It is difficult to use outside of Drytron. Even the Herald deck, as I talked before, they'll use Little Herald, which doesn't negate summons. It negates everything else, but not summons. And it's a level 6, not a level 12. So, really, Little Herald will just replace this one if this gets banned. Which is fair, but, not negating summons, I think is kind of, a pretty good step down. And really, I still think this card should be banned though. I think that it does way too much. I think the fact you can negate everything isn't fair. Even if it's a matter of, you can get rid of fairies, so you can't negate everything. Eventually, there will come another time where we can search fairies very well again. They will make more cards in time to do that. So why don't we just get rid of the problem now? Why don't we save ourselves the issue of having to ban a bunch of cards that search a lot of fairies, and just ban the problem? Why don't we just ban Halki Firebags instead of banning all the tuners? It's the same argument. So I think this card should be banned. I don't believe it's fair, and I don't believe it should be in Master. And our number 1 card, you probably all saw this one coming, it's Maxi. Big problem card. During either player's turn, send this card from your hand to the graveyard. This turn, each time your opponent special summons monsters, immediately draw 1 card, hard once per turn. This is the most controversial card of Master Duel right now. It's so bad that it's got its own phrase of the Maxi challenge, which pretty much means, let's say I play Emancipator and my opponent activates Maxi. I have 2 options. I can pass my turn and say, nope, I'm not giving you the card advantage, I believe you won't kill me. Or I can do a small combo and not go full way, but give something that I don't believe I'm going to die with. Or I can play through the Maxi, I can tear through their deck, either try to deck them out, or fully believe that I can put enough of a board that they're not going to be able to beat me with. It's also a problem because this only affects combo decks. The existence of Maxi actually promotes decks like Eldritch, really. Because if I'm playing Eldritch, I don't care about Maxi. And pretty much everyone's got to play this card. Every deck has to play Maxi. Because it's an insta-win, right? Let's say I go against Tri-Brigade. I activate Maxi, they got that coin toss. And usually, they can't actually beat Maxi challenge. And Emancipator, really, they can't beat Maxi challenge usually. You have to be playing a deck that can either deck your opponent out, or has some FTK in it, so really be confident against the Maxi challenge. And it's very sacky as well. There's no reasonable way to search this, right? You can't, like, you know, activate a card in your hand in your opponent's turn, search Maxi, then activate Maxi. You can't do that. You have to see this card on its own. So you have like a 3 in 40, for most decks at least, chance to just get an insta-win. That's not very fair, but okay. Let's see why it's not that bad. Maxi, there's a lot of contention in TCG about they want Maxi back. It keeps the combo decks in check, which is true. Certainly the combo decks which go absolutely wild, you know, FTK your opponent, put out 5 negates, 6 negates, 12 negates, right? The typical ones, they certainly get put in place by this card. However, so do the ones that are actually fair, right? Dragunity, they're kind of fucked. What else? Like Medolce, they're fucked. Like any combo deck is fucked by Maxi. It's not just the big ones you think of. The big ones you think of probably can deal with it better. The rogue decks also get hurt, and probably more. And again, like I said, it only affects the combo decks, right? The fact that it only affects the combo decks means that, you know, if you're really scared of it, you do have an option. You don't have to worry about it, right? If Maxi was such a problem, then why isn't everyone playing Control? Why isn't everyone playing Eldritch? Again, the reason for that is people will play the game as they want to. Certain decks are more effective, and Maxi Saki, you're not going to always see it. And like I said, it's not reasonably searchable, right? So, you know, it's not a problem that every game is decided by Maxi. However, that doesn't change that certain games will be, and that's not fair. You didn't actually do anything. And let's say I'm playing an FTK deck, right? Let's say I'm playing Pendulum FTK. How's this going to stop me? If I'm going to kill you, I'm going to kill you. This isn't going to stop me. I'm not going to say no to the Maxi challenge when I know in my hand I can kill you. So genuinely, I think Maxi should be banned. For as much as I'm someone who in the TCG campaigned for Maxi to be legal, I'm going to have to say no. I don't think the card should be legal right now. I can see why it's very unhealthy, although I do say I enjoy a lot of the chaos it can bring sometimes. So I think the card should be banned. And that's it. I hope you've enjoyed this top 10 video. Make sure to subscribe, leave a like, and hit the bell if you do choose to subscribe. Hope you've enjoyed this content. Trying to make my way into making more adventurous and better content. Make sure you stay subscribed for the tier lists. We're going through every tier list in alphabetical order, and on top of that, I'm hoping to maybe get around to making some of the bigger tier lists and some of the more adventurous content as well. Thank you for watching.